Welcome
We have started.
to the April, all right, welcome to the CSINext chapter meeting for April. If you are a frequent member and chapter member and guest, welcome back and thank you for attending. This month we have some new faces in the crowd, probably due to this whole COVID-19 issue, and I wanted to provide a special shout out to some of you. Each of the next groups that we mentioned have been invited due to connections in our chapter. It will give you a chance just to see how wide-reaching our scope is. CSI Charlotte chapter members, we're glad you're here. Special thanks to Nina for letting the chapter leadership know that our meetings were actually an option. Let's move to the other side of the country. Pikes Peak chapter, welcome. Special thanks to Joni for suggesting our chapter as a place to provide an educational outlet for this month. The CSI Cleveland chapter, thank you as well for attending. Know that your invitation was due to a conversation I had with Scott Michael Taylor reaching out a couple months ago where we talked about having another option for some virtual learning for your chapter. My name is Thad Goodman. I masquerade as the chapter president. It actually is our entire leadership team that makes this chapter a success. On the phone today, running behind the scenes, you'll hear from him at the end of the presentation with a couple reminders, is one founding member, Daniel Hargreaves, who's in Tucson, Arizona, and he's basically the keystone of the chapter. He's a former chapter president. He created our website. He's created an app, which is interesting. If you're interested in learning more about that, let us know. He does a great blog. If you've never read it, you need to go on the website and hear that. And in his spare time, he's our treasurer. Cynthia Bellisle is our secretary from Arlington, Texas, and she's also a former president. Catherine Merrick is a president-elect from Naples, Idaho. Joni Zimmerman is a director from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Bob LeClaire is a director from Mills River, North Carolina. Michael Young is our immediate past president from Denver, Colorado. Mark Ogg handles chapter support and is a former chapter president from Loveland, Ohio. Nina, who I mentioned earlier, is our program coordinator and a former chapter president from Charlotte, North Carolina. So as you can see, we're all over the place. That's just the leadership team. That doesn't include the types of people that we have in the chapter that go from one end of the continent to the other, and we actually have a couple members that are international as well. So we're pleased you can carve some time out for us today. Like most other CSI chapters, just know that we hold a chapter meeting the first Thursday of every month. You're always welcome to attend should you be interested. Check out our website to think about what our meeting topics look like. Our topics are as varied as our members. Next month we have a contractor panel, which we expect will be fascinating. It's always nice to hear from the other side of the team. So just a quick note about today's presentation. When the meeting is over, you'll get a survey. For those of you that are new to this, you'll get a survey. Please fill out the survey and click submit. Include your AIA number if you are an AIA member and need credit. This is our attendance sheet, our virtual attendance sheet. Type in your information, hit submit, and you'll get a survey a few days after this meeting is over. You'll also get a reminder, so if you forget the first day, we give you one more chance, and then occasionally we actually make some proactive phone calls, but we'd love to have you be the person that sends this in. Throughout this presentation, if you have some questions, please type in your questions and they will be addressed during the presentation. So we don't expect you to hold your questions till the end. We're going to test Jeff in his ability to be able to mix and match and be able to move off the presentation. Jeff Sukup is our presenter today. We're excited to have him. His presentation is Portable Fire Extinguishers, designed for safety, accessibility, and compliance in commercial environments. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jeff. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And what a time to be alive that we get to reach out over the internet and connect with everybody in such a crazy time. So again, appreciate the opportunity for everybody, and I thank everybody for their time. When we get for this presentation, the way I will go about this, I want to tell you a little bit about my company and what we're doing, and then just so you get some background on where we fit into this presentation, and then just go from there and go through the CEU. So Oval Fire Extinguishers is part of the Water Saver Guardian family. So to give you a little idea, Water Saver was started right after World War II. Water Saver is the manufacturer of lab fixtures and fittings, based right in downtown Chicago. It's a third-generation manufacturer, still doing all of our manufacturing, pipe turning, machining, powder coating, chrome plating, right next to where they actually print and ship the Tribune, for now at least. In the 1970s, at the advent of OSHA, with the requirement of emergency drench fixtures, Water Saver created the company Guardian Equipment. Guardian has been around since 1970. Guardian is based on Goose Island, if you're familiar with the beer. Goose Island is right in the heart of Chicago as well. And then in 2015, 2016, somebody launched the Oval Fire Extinguisher. So because of the updates with CMS and the compliant restrictions or restrictions as far as horizontal protrusion, Oval was launched to really address all the challenges that you associate with specifying and designing traditional 10-pound fire extinguishers. So ADA Life Safety Code and CMS compliance, space constraints, and just some of your challenges with installation. So with that, we are going to start the CEU after a little background. So this is going to be portable fire extinguishers, designing for safety, accessibility, mostly commercial environments, but there is a portion specifically pertaining to healthcare. So this is all obviously the housekeeping. So the objectives are going to be understand your requirements for portable fire extinguishers, look at some of the common types, fires and extinguishers, your placement, spacing requirements, then looking at your requirements for accessibility and how they relate to fire extinguishers, going through some of the different players in that area, then addressing the special considerations that run into healthcare, because I think it really starts getting confusing because there are so many different agencies, codes, and standards that it's kind of a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Then finally, look at some of the different extinguisher installations and look at the advantages and disadvantages that you currently have. So there are three main fire protection standards, or three main standards that will impact your fire extinguisher placement and specification. So NFPA 10 is going to be the biggest one and the one you're probably most familiar with. So this is going to show you really all of the requirements for your extinguishers. So testing, maintenance, inspection, placement, size, number. This is going to really be our primary guide for selecting fire extinguishers. So this will go through all of your types of fire anticipated to be encountered, size to be encountered, construction of your occupancy of the facility, go through your UL rating, which I'm sure there will be some questions on because it can get quite confusing. But if you notice in the top right-hand corner, or not totally top right-hand corner, but in the right, that is the basic fire tetrahedron. So if you can see my cursor, this is what I'm talking about. So we know, and NFPA has put out this graphic, that for every fire there are three main components, and that's going to be your heat, or three main elements. That'll be your heat, oxygen, and then your fuel source. So the idea behind NFPA 10 and this fire tetrahedron is to understand what fuel and heat source and oxygen, how they are reacting, and how we can disrupt that chemical reaction when it starts. And that'll help us select the proper fire extinguisher, and then also look at the different placing and everything associated with fire extinguisher selection. So going through your different classes, and this is just going to be your the top five, your different 5 classes. just a quick, easy mnemonic device for you to know right off the top of your head. So A is going to be your Class A fire is A for ash. So anything that develops an ash when it burns or creates an ash. So, from framing components to papers to furniture, textiles, commonly associated with, classrooms, office space, that is going to be your Class A fire. So B, so your mnemonic device for this is going to be flammable liquids. So liquids boil. So Class B is going to be your flammable liquids. So from your butane, propane, gas, alcohol, diesel, all of these will be considered a Class B fire. So you're going to find those in storage areas, research operations, garages, manufacturing, Class B fire. So C is going to stand for any charged fire. So any energized, electrical equipment, whether it's a result from faulty wiring, overcharging, overloads. This is going to be a Class C fire, and you're going to want to use a non-conductive medium to extinguish this. For D, so Class D is going to be, you're going to use dust. So metal shavings, sawdust, anything that is going to quickly react, produce either a fire or an explosion. But Class D is going to be your metal shavings. So machine shops, wood shops, high manufacturing is where you're going to see a lot of your D fire. This medium is going to be, you're going to want to use something that does not react with burning metal. So, water is not going to react well with metal, that we know. So you're going to have to use a, oh, looks like we have a question. All right, so. Oh. All right, I don't think that's a question.
I think it is. So, it wasn't mentioned, Jeff, but basically the question is, will these slides be available after the presentation?
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood that. Sorry about it. Yeah, I will make this. Yeah, I will share this for everybody when this is over. And you can tell me the best way to distribute it. But yeah, I am happy to share this.
Yeah, we usually have a past meeting section, and if there's a PDF version that you prefer to share in some form, we link it to that.
Sure. And for
okay,
anybody
perfect.
who's wants some relaxing reading over the weekend, you can just pop this open. All right. So Class D, again, dust. Your Class K, the easiest one, is going to be kitchen. So Class K is going to be your vegetable or animal fats. You're going to use, this is considered a liquid fire, so you're going to use a liquid extinguisher. But Class K, kitchen, fast spreading, liquid fire, it's going to be mostly animal fats and vegetable fats. So Nfpa 10 also breaks down your occupancy hazards or identifies your occupancy hazards. The most common one is going to be your light hazard occupancy. So it's going to be typically be, or it's going to be your Class A and Class B flammables, minor in scale. So this is going to be your offices, classrooms, churches. This is going to have a low spread rate, low heat. Your Class A fires, like Class Bs. Ordinary hazard occupancy, and all of this is kind of common sense progression, but more of the same amount, Class A, Class B flammables. This is going to be slightly heavier commercial grade, dining areas, mercantile shops, research operations, auto showrooms, parking garages, and then your class or extra hazard occupancy is going to be when you are going to be, heavy manufacturing, paint, coating, dipping, anything that is going to be a very high spread, high heat, and highly flammable area. So your extinguisher locations, and these are going to be largely based on your type of fire. So Class A is what we're probably all most familiar with, your 75 feet travel distance between extinguishers. Class B is going to be a maximum of 30 to 50, depending on the quantity and type of flammable liquid that is in your area. Class C, so that is going to take into account the Class A, the presence of which Class A and Class B and the amount, because we know a Class C fire isn't only going to be a Class C fire. It starts because of electricity, but then it spreads to your framing components or the alcohol that is present in the room, and eventually becomes either an A or a B fire, or a combination of both. Class D fire, you're going to have 75 feet travel distance, and then Class K, because it is such a highly flammable substance, a fast spreading fire, and you're also going to be in very closed area, most likely in a kitchen, you're going to have a maximum travel distance of 30 feet. So your UL extinguisher rating, this is another area covered by Nfpa 10. So the A portion is quite confusing, so bear with me if I confuse you. I apologize. This is something a rating that's been around for 100 years. Technology has changed significantly, but so your A rating is how much Class A fire extinguishing capability your extinguisher has in relation to gallons of water. So, in 100 years ago when NFPA, or 120 years ago when the NFPA was looking at how we can rate fire extinguishers, they said, this 10-gallon fire extinguisher will put out, 10 gallons worth of water of extinguisher, and that is a, 6A rating. So in today's standards, because we're using powder, they try and relate it to gallons of water. So for some reason, they've decided that the number in front of A is equivalent to 1.25 gallons of water capability of extinguishing a Class A fire. So apologies if that is very confusing. But if you look, so a 4A fire would be equivalent to 5 gallons of water. A 6A would be equivalent to 7.5 gallons of water. So hopefully I didn't confuse you too much, but that is the nature of a 100-year-old industry. The B class, or the B rating on a fire extinguisher, is much easier. So that 30B is just 30 feet or 30 square feet of Class B fire. So hopefully one day they'll update this and make it a little bit easier. The C rating for you is going to be that this is a non-reactive agent, so it is suitable for a Class C fire. So apologies if I confused you on that one, but hopefully it added a little clarification. So mounting, NFPA 10 makes 2 differentiations or distinctions. So less than 40 pounds, you can be mounted no higher than 60 feet, or 60 inches above the finished floor. The bottom of the extinguisher must be at least 4 inches above the finished floor. For extinguishers mounted that weigh over 40 pounds, your only restriction is that you can't mount the top of the extinguisher over 42 inches above the finished floor. So NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code.
Quick question, Jeff, on the back slide. Sure. Sorry, and this is my accessibility kicking in. Sure. What code drives that height? Because per ADA, it's across the board at 42 inches, regardless of weight. So so the challenge there is that there's a lot of different cooks in the kitchen, and I will actually touch on that further on in the presentation. But yeah, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of different kind of talking heads who are they contradict each other. So that is a great question, and I appreciate it. So the Life Safety Code, this is going to tell you how to design to minimize the danger of life from the effects of fire, including your smoke, heat, toxic gases that are created once a building starts to burn. The Life Safety Code is going to tell you, what happens in a building after a fire starts. It'll tell you how to design to address how buildings should be built and operated to minimize the threat
to life in the event of a fire occurs. So currently, we are on the 2018 version of the Life Safety Code. The most commonly cited and used across the U.S. due to, mostly driven by CMS, is going to be the 2012 version. But just be aware that we are on the 2018 version. Eventually, it will be updated and codified across the U.S., hopefully more, on a federal level through CMS. So, we're going to want to start designing to the 2018 standards, in my opinion. So we're focusing on the movement of people with the Life Safety Code. So we must be able to move from an area where we are to an area of safety. So Nfpa 101 is going to define, or what constitutes a means of egress and how we are constructing that, how we are making sure that people can use it when there is a fire and that it is accessible to everyone. So your three components for your means of egress is going to be your exit access. So wherever you are in the building and how you get to an exit. Your exit, which is going to be, consist of your doors, stairways, hallways, all those components, and then your exit discharge, so that your path from the exit to a public way of access or street or alley. So in healthcare,
real quick question came in. What is CMS?
Oh, I apologize. CMS is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So that is, and I apologize. I'm kind of so focused on healthcare all the time that I just use the acronyms.
The Joint Commissions, yes. Yes.
Yes. So CMS is your Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. They are your AHJ for, really the accreditation for people who are, or for facilities that are taking or accepting Medicare and Medicaid dollars. Thanks.
Oh, another question. How does location determined by LSC relate to the IBC?
So you're asking, how does location determined by the Life Safety Code relate to the IBC?
Yes.
Can you be more specific on location? Which location? Or are you talking about how to, different state codes?
Distances, maybe? Yeah.
Okay. John, if you could, I guess, give me a little bit more there. I apologize.
I think earlier you had set up extinguisher distances. Oh, there we go. Does the IBC have a specific requirement or only in the Life Safety Code?
So your Life Safety Code is going to talk about your acceptable mounting heights. Your Nfpa 10 is going to give you your distances. So that's going to be, distances don't really fall in your life safety, distances between extinguishers don't fall in the Life Safety Code. That maybe we can talk afterwards or open up the discussion when I'm done. I guess I'm still kind of don't really know what the total question is. Okay, I'll answer this afterwards, or we can connect offline. Apologies on that. So the Life Safety Code, when we're discussing movement of people, the safe area is going to have two different distinctions. So one in healthcare and one in everything else. So your safe area and everything else is going to be outside or within a building, separated from the fire by moving to a separate fire compartment or smoke compartment or an area of rescue. In healthcare, because we are dealing with people who may not be able to, or are, chair bound or bed, in a bed, we must design to keep them safe in place. So we're protecting our opponents in place. So OSHA, OSHA is kind of took the best of both worlds, put them together, and kind of made their rulings. But it's more of an after fact. The Nfpa is the most consulted and kind of paramount when you're looking at this. The OSHA has decided that the employer shall provide fire extinguishers, mount, locate. They should be the appropriate fire extinguishers for the degree of hazard and the types or the class that we're going to encounter. OSHA looks at your mounting height. They take a similar Nfpa 10 mounting height. So carrying handle must be placed between 3.5 and 5 feet. So again, this contradicts ADA, but further down the road we'll address that again. And then OSHA only looks at the distance as 75 feet or less. So the Nfpa 10 and Nfpa 101 would still, be prioritized over this. But, this is OSHA's take on mounting height and distance between extinguishers. So getting into the ADA and different disability standards, I will touch on IBC, so maybe I'll answer your questions here, hopefully. So the Americans with Disabilities Act is a civil rights law. So a lot of people, most people, I guess some people know this, some people don't, but it is a civil rights law because this is considered discrimination based on disability. So because, back in, for the longest time until the 90s, public transportation or, just using a hospital wasn't accessible to people with disabilities. So currently, I believe there's almost 20% of Americans are, or I guess it's closer to 18%, but 18% of Americans do have some sort of disability, whether it's cognitive, visual, physical. So that is a large portion of the United States that is, could possibly not be able to, enjoy or use places of public accommodation, which is deemed discrimination. So ADA timeline. So it's passed in by the Senate in '88, unanimous voice vote in '90, and then signed into law by George H.W. Bush, July 26, 1990. So the ADA is going to impact your extinguishers or portable fire extinguishers in 3 ways. So protruding objects into circulation paths, accessible routes and means of egress, and then your height, reach, and operation of a fire extinguisher. So circulation path, so the exterior or interior way of passage provided for pedestrians. So your Nfpa 10 requires fire extinguishers along normal paths of travel, including exits from areas. So almost every single area that you are going to be specifying a fire extinguisher will be subject to the 2010 ADA standards. So the ADA, 4-inch projection limits will almost always apply to when you're installing a fire extinguisher. So protruding objects. So any object with a leading edge more than 27 inches and no greater than 80 inches above the finished floor shall protrude 4 inches maximum horizontally into the hallway path. There are some exceptions, your chair rails, but this is, this is really where you're going to see the majority of your fire extinguishers impacted. So currently, because of this 4-inch requirement and just the, I guess the inherent construction or the standard construction of a fire extinguisher, there are no commercially available 5 or 10-pound extinguishers that will meet this requirement. So this has largely kind of been accepted as the norm within the industry. I know the Joint Commission will survey to 6 inches for protrusion, just because the old 2012 Life Safety Code is kind of a shrug, but you know, the 4-inch requirement still applies to fire extinguishers, and you are required, if the DOJ came into any building in the U.S. and an object that was protruding from the wall was greater than 4 inches, that would be a violation of the ADA. So, and then your accessible routes is mean. You have a question? If you're leading edge, if you install,
I can answer that one.
Yeah,
No.
if your leading edge is below 27 inches and it protrudes further than 4 inches, then that will comply.
Correct.
So your accessible spaces, or I'm sorry, you know, all of your routes and means of egress must be a minimum of 36 inches. So clear width is measured at its narrowest point. When you do have a fire extinguisher that is surface mounted or, you know, semi-recessed, you are going to be counted from the most narrow point. So your fire extinguisher, again, is impacted by the ADA. So I pretty much just cleared that one too. So your height, reach, and operation of a fire extinguisher. So this creates kind of a challenge for everybody. So as we know, you know, building elements must be operable with one hand, not require grasping or turning of the hand, and require no more than 5 pounds of force to actuate. So because of these requirements, no fire extinguishers on the market today will meet these requirements. So to use a fire extinguisher, you know, and I'm mimicking this while I'm talking, but you must pull the extinguisher. The weight is going to be, you know, require definitely 2 hands. If you've ever, you know, carried a loaded 10-pound fire extinguisher, it's going to require grasping of the handle, and squeezing will require more than 5 pounds of force. So these are not inherently, by their design, they do not meet these standards, but we design to include the ADA because people may be not able to walk, but they still are, you know, have the upper body strength to use and discharge a fire extinguisher. So we need to design for them to have the best opportunity or best chance of being safe and protecting themselves. So your forward and side reach are applicable to fire extinguishers. So no higher than 48 inch, no lower than 15. And that's going to be for your forward and side reach. So ANSI 117.1 guidelines. So they're going to require that your fire extinguishers are mounted 48 inches or less. So the standard round extinguisher, again, is going to be protrude more than your 4 inches. Your ANSI A117.1 was, you know, the beginning of, you know, really your accessible or universal design codes. It was done with a study for, I believe it was 40 years by a guy by the name of Dr. Jonathan or Timothy Nugent, based out of UIUC in Champaign, Illinois. And that was eventually, his study was eventually codified into this and really created universal design as we know it today. So that has been adopted also by the IBC. They've adopted their horizontal protruding max 4 inches. So NFPA 101 in accessibility. So this is where it really starts getting confusing. So NFPA 101 Life Safety Code substantially agrees with the ADA, ICC, ANSI A117.1 with both of those. So for example, it's mirror for your accessible means of egress. You know, your corridor walls. The challenge where we get this is that they allow protrusions, non-continuous projections or protrusions cannot be more than 6 inches. So right there, there is a contradiction between the NFPA 101 and the NFPA, or I'm sorry, and the ADA. So thankfully, NFPA 2018 has adopted the 4-inch protrusion rule. It's slowly being adopted. I know the armed forces across the board has adopted NFPA. They always adopt the latest NFPA 101. I believe Alabama, if there's any Alabamans on here, feel free to correct, but I believe they were the first state to adopt, which was nice to see. But currently for CMS and federal work, there is still that contradiction because they're still on the 2012 version of the Life Safety Code. So that brings us to healthcare projects and some of the challenges that we run into with NFPA 101, CMS compliance. So Social Security Act, just for a brief history, they created these or established the minimum health, safety, and CLIA standards that must be provided or must be met by providers and suppliers who are participating in Medicare and Medicaid programs. So Department of Health and Human Services decided that CMS, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, is going to be in charge of enforcing this. So they are the AHJ. So accrediting organizations that they've decided to go out there and do all the surveys. Everybody here is probably familiar with the Joint Commission. They're handling about 90% of all of the surveys. They're a nonprofit who just solely does this. But there are 3 others that you'll probably run into depending on where you are regionally in the U.S. Medicaid, so I don't think many need to go through this, but this is going to be your state public assistance program. Services furnished through institutions that must be certified for Medicare. They're subject to all the standards for Medicaid as well. And then Medicare is going to be your federal insurance program. Social Security Act will designate who are providers, who are suppliers, and what standards they must meet. So providers and suppliers, this is a brief, not completely comprehensive, but this will give you an idea of who are providers, who are suppliers. Both terms are applicable for Medicare and Medicaid, but your suppliers, laboratories, clinics, ambulatory surgery centers, and then your providers are going to be your hospitals, critical hospice, nursing homes. So all of these facilities, if they are accepting Medicare and Medicaid dollars in the U.S., they are subject to meeting the 2012 NFPA 101 standards, designing and then eventually updating, depending on what they're doing. So DHHS, this is a final ruling that was put out in May 4th, 2016, where they adopted nationally the NFPA 101 2012 Life Safety Code. So everybody receiving medical or government dollars, medical or Medicare or Medicaid are subject to their standards, to the standards that are in the NFPA 101 2012. So here lies the question that you had earlier, Thad. They directly contradict each other. So in 2000, the ADA and the Life Safety Code directly contradict each other. In May 4th, 2016, the CMS issued a final ruling. Confuse myself with all these acronyms. That stated, therefore, facilities must comply with the ADA's requirements for protruding objects, which establishes more stringent protrusion limits. So, in bold face right there, they say, where you run into contradictions between the Life Safety Code and the ADA, you must follow the more stringent protrusion limits found. So ADA Title II, this is going to give you, what you're going to have to do when you're making structural changes. new construction, then existing facilities, what they're supposed to do when updating for your or removal of barriers, and then what you're doing, structural changes, new construction. It's all out there for you. One of the biggest factors when you are updating is going to be the 20% rule. So if you are making a change or when you're making alterations to an area's primary function, which a lot of this is still up for discussion with your AHJs, and when you're going through the process of design, you must spend 20% of your budget on the accessible path of travel, or to make sure the path of travel is accessible. So beginning from the entrance to the actual area, the primary function area, you must spend 20% of your budget upgrading for universal design or accessibility. So one of the areas where you can kind of thread a needle if you're trying to be as efficient with your dollars as possible, this is your prioritization list. But when you're looking at your accessible route, I'm working with a facilities owner or a large institution. We're doing a project where this 20% rule is applicable. I know that I have a bunch of extinguishers on that route that are debatably compliant, but probably should be recessed or moved to a lower profile. I know that they are going to be, have to come down for inspection or, possibly hydrostatic testing. Now is a great time. You can use this servicing of your extinguishers, making them more accessible to, count towards that $20. So you're kind of double dipping or getting both sides, playing both sides on this one, but use it to your advantage, know the rules. Additional consideration. Sorry?
Sorry, real quick. You brought up an interesting point on the last slide about lower mounting height. Is there a minimum height to that control? You said there was a maximum at the beginning of this. Is there a minimum? I can't just put them on the floor. I'm assuming.
No. So Nfpa 10 gives you the ruling that 4 inches above the finished floor is the minimum that you can mount an extinguisher.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So additional considerations that we're looking at right now in healthcare that are going to apply to fire extinguishers. So ligature resistance is one of the hottest topics. It probably, I think COVID-19 probably replaced it recently, but in healthcare, ligature resistance is a huge concern. So if you look at, I live in Chicago, we're based out of Chicago. One of our largest institutions recently had, sadly, somebody injured themselves with a fixture in their behavioral health unit. And I don't know if it was the DOJ or the Joint Commission who came in, surveyed the facility, and found so many non-compliant or ligature concerns that they actually had to mothball the entire behavioral health wing. And now I know there's plans to upgrade, but that's a significant challenge that you're running into. So ligature resistance, be aware that there are, I know this is probably one of the smaller ones, but just make sure that if you are in a behavioral health facility or areas where behavioral health will be impacted, ligature resistant extinguisher cabinet options are available. Additionally, this is going to be one of the only places where you are, allowed to have a lockable cabinet. I know, ligature with this, you're allowed to have a keyed lock for your fire extinguisher cabinets, as long as everybody in the area has a key. MRI safety. So we've all seen, or most of us probably seen the videos of, the hospital beds or things being pulled into an MRI area. So you are going to want to make sure that when you're specifying fire extinguishers, that you are considering whether something is MR conditional, MR compliant, is safe to be used around, in the area, in presence of an MRI. Additional considerations. So, am I able to maximize, the square footage of my facility. I know some areas, if you are, doing a $200, $300, $400 square foot hospital or lab area, you want to being able to gain 2 inches on your walls or on your corridors is significant. It adds up over time. Your materials and cost savings. Another, just speaking to being in kind of the lab area or in the lab space, being able to uniformly design our rooms without having to create bump outs, is really great. I know we're really moving to the mobile or movable lab stations. Efficiency of installation. So we're working on a project in Central Illinois where they got tagged by the Joint Commission for having their cabinets mounted too high, out of compliance. And this was an old community hospital, built probably sometime in the 50s, where they had lath and plaster walls above, and then some sort of natural stone wall on the bottom. And they had to drop, I think it was 30 or 40 different extinguisher cabinets, and cut into their first solution was cutting into a wall. They're working on a shoestring budget because they're a county hospital. So it really created a budgetary constraints for them. So they found a low profile fire extinguisher option that they could surface mount in a cabinet that was still within your 4-inch compliance. And we're able to save, $3,000–$4,000 per extinguisher cabinet because of that, the opportunity out there, the solution that they found. So this is a brief, a recent statement from, you've probably seen Seema Verma on the news lately. She came out, they are trying to be as transparent as possible. We are out there effectively overseeing how healthcare facilities that are accredited are spending our dollars. So they are out there terminating people's accreditation for violations. So you want to make sure that you are, the healthcare facilities that are dealing with this are complying to the letter of the Life Safety Code. Once you lose your accreditation, it is very difficult to get back. So just going through some different installation options. We're going to be picking on O'Hare a lot here. So, any of my Chicagoans out there, this is O'Hare. I took this picture while I was running through, but standard round extinguisher. This is definitely not ADA compliant, most likely not Nfpa compliant. One of the things with your standard round extinguishers is it goes on a mounting bracket. So if you're in, next time you're in a big box store, a lot of the times they'll hide, your extinguishers. Extinguishers are supposed to be as conspicuous as possible. So they'll put your extinguishers in, a column or an I-beam, and, it's typically questionably mounted at the height maybe off. And that's because they do have, there have been plenty of lawsuits where somebody will be pushing a cart and run into a fire extinguisher and it'll fall or land on their toes or accidentally discharge. So one of the challenges is that with these flimsy brackets on standard round extinguishers, they are not as dependable as we'd like. So just keep that in mind. Next time you're in one of those areas, look, it's normally pushed behind a drywall cart or something. But with the advent of low-profile fire extinguishers, these are going to be compliant, whether it's ADA, Nfpa. There is a button hook mounting bracket on these, so they're very easy to mount. And maybe I'll hold my breath. There's a video here which may or may not work, but this is an integral button hook. So when you do hit this, it swivels rather than falling off potentially. So again, this is O'Hare. This is a cabinet just mounted right in the middle of the walkway as soon as you go through security. definitely not ADA compliant, definitely not Nfpa compliant. It's certainly is conspicuous, but if you're going through here with, a cart or anything, you can easily damage this. These are expensive. It is kind of tamper resistant, low profile. So this is a low profile cabinet, similar to the one I was discussing before, where we were able to just surface mount and remain compliant. This was a project in California where they were building out a steel barrier at the bottom for cane detection, and then mounting 6-inch, because they're mounting 6-inch cabinets. With this, they moved to a low profile cabinet and were able to remain compliant, value engineer, not have to do the steel barrier, and save a significant amount of money, still being tamper resistant and compliant. So semi-recessed cabinets, these probably the least desirable of your installations besides just surface mounting a fire extinguisher. We're all familiar with these. If you stayed at a chain hotel recently, you've probably seen hundreds of these, but these are easily damaged, not very attractive. You're still cutting into your wall, which, installation-wise is, a significant investment. With your surface mount or with your low profile extinguishers, you can recess into a standard 4-inch wall. So if you're cutting in, you may as well do a full recess. So, and then you're fully recessed. So this is going to require you a 6-inch stud or 8-inch CMU. Probably a nice installation, just labor intensive. And then, with your low profile extinguishers, now that this exists, you can recess into a 4-inch wall with 0 problems. Real easy to get in there. So just to recap, we went through the ADA, Nfpa 101, Nfpa 10, CMS, different design considerations, looked at some materials, methods, features, and benefits. So with that, thank you for your time and appreciate the opportunity with you.
Thanks, Jeff. Great presentation. Sure. And you were worried you were going to have lots of leftover time.
I had to take some deep breaths.
You did good. Perfect timing. We had one last question roll in. Now that we're off the AI non-proprietary part, are there other manufacturers who make oval type extinguishers?
Sure. So JL works with us and they manufacture orbits. So you can purchase those through them. If you're in a competitive or a public bid situation, it would specify orbits or the orbits brand and then oval. But it's still, they're working with us.
Perfect. Another question, the cost of the low profile extinguisher, how does it compare with the traditional?
That is an excellent question, and I should have addressed that. So you're probably a 2.5x to 3 on the standard extinguisher versus the oval. So a couple nice things about oval where, so ovals are manufactured, they're aluminum body. So, because gas, once the most efficient way to store gas is in a cylinder, we actually have to install baffles in the body of the fire extinguisher. So if I'll close your question, but I'll go back to the beginning of the slide. So because of their nature, if we didn't put the baffles in, they would probably puff out very quickly. But because we do have the baffles, they'll hold their shape. Unfortunately, aluminum is, it's difficult to weld and it's more expensive for us. So that's where a lot of the cost is. I anticipate, we got our UL listing in 2016 and really have just gotten the product to a point where it's starting to mature right now. So I anticipate the cost will once we kind of an economy of scale, we'll be able to get more efficient with some things and sell at a better price. But right now, probably 2.5x. The advantage is, hopefully you can create more parity by moving from a 6-inch to a 4-inch wall.
All right, great. No other questions have come in. Really want to appreciate everyone making this, setting aside time to attend this presentation. And as Thad mentioned in the beginning, if you need a CEU after this webinar ends, there will be a short survey, what you thought. And there's also a opportunity to provide your AI number if you need it registered for that. With that, once again, Jeff, thank you. I really enjoyed it. And for those penciling in next month, May 7th is our contractors panel that we're scrambling to get put together under the new Zoom format. And we look forward, hopefully y'all can make time for that too.
Well, thank you so much. This is such a unique opportunity.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, everyone, and have a good rest of the day.
You too.